I'm one of the founders of Ethereum. I'm the developer. I started developing Ethereum somewhere around December. And I've been doing that ever since. This is a presentation. I haven't given any presentation in a very, very long time, so please bear with me. I want to give a quick introduction. What is Ethereum? Has anyone heard of Ethereum? Any hands? Oh, quite a few. That's good. So how does it work? How does it compare to Bitcoin? Because that's what most people are familiar with. I thought maybe it might be handy to give a little bit of a comparison. So what is Ethereum and how does it compare to the Bitcoin? How does it work and what are the additional features, or how many features did we remove? So how does it compare? It is a peer-to-peer network, like what Bitcoin is. It has a blockchain and it has accounts. In Bitcoins, you have an address and you send Bitcoin to it, and you use inputs and you use outputs. So if I send someone a Bitcoin, I put something in and something comes out. Ethereum does it a little bit different, and everyone has one account. So kind of like a bank account. So if you have a bank account, you have a number to it, and we use an address. So if you were to sign a transaction with whatever private key that you have, you would get an address from that, and you derive that, and you can use that in order to send someone money. So if I were to send you Ether to someone else, I would just simply subtract it and add it to someone else's account. So it doesn't use any inputs or outputs. It's much, much simpler. It's more of a very big ledger that has all the accounts in it, and it has the balance with it. That's all it is. So nothing difficult, just easier, and it works. So we have a blockchain as well, but we kind of do it differently. In Bitcoin, if you mine, you can mine a still block, which means that your block is basically invalid. In Ethereum,
so what's a still block?
A still block is a block which has been mined after any block has already been mined, and so you have if you have a block which has a parent, and you mine the same block with the same parent.
So there are multiple miners competing to find the same answer, and if multiple ones find
in Bitcoin for Bitcoin,
yeah. Sure.
So for Ethereum, the same thing can happen, but it happens at a much higher rate. So if I mine, I can someone else is mining as well, and I find a block and someone else finds a block. So which one is the proper one? We come with an incentive that still blocks can be valid as well in a certain sense, meaning that if I mine a block, I find it like 12 o'clock, and someone else finds one at one past 12 o'clock. That block is a still block, but it doesn't mean that it is invalid. It's still valid because you put work into it, and I put work into it, so you should get some sort of reward. So in that sense, still blocks get rewarded as well. It doesn't get rewarded immediately, but it gets rewarded the next block. So I find a block, someone else finds a block, but at a later time. But it doesn't mean that the second block is invalid. Then another miner comes along which sees that the previous block was the correct one, and then it will see like, okay, well I have a still block which we call uncles. We take those blocks and we insert them into the new block, meaning that the still block gets a reward. I get a reward for including it, so there's an incentive for including still blocks. And why do we do that? Because we have very fast block time. So Bitcoin has them somewhere around, I think, 10 minutes. Sometimes it might take longer, but we have them around 60 seconds. So it might be handy to, if I'm mined, then someone else is mined as well. So it might be nice to, have still blocks get some sort of reward. That's all Ethereum actually is. It doesn't have any, it doesn't have any more features than that, except for one, which is contracts. A contract is basically a piece of code that you take and you can put it in the blockchain. Kind of looks like this. You just simply create a contract, and you put in a bunch of programming stuff that someone should be familiar with, and then it stays in the blockchain. more or less at least. It doesn't, you know, if we were to put the entire thing into the blockchain would grow enormously, but it gets in some way it gets inserted. The details are not important, it's very technical, and it goes beyond the scope of this presentation, and it gets inserted somehow. So then it stays there, and if I want to run this contract in some way, I were to send some transaction to that contract, and that contract would run. So that means that, for example, a guy made tic-tac-toe a couple of days ago in Ethereum, so he just creates a contract for tic-tac-toe, he puts it into the contract, into the network, and then someone can signal the contract for like, hey, I'm player one, and I want to start a new game. And then someone else can say, okay, well, that's cool. I want to join you. And then they can compete with transactions. So they would send a transaction in order to make a move in the tic-tac-toe, which is kind of cool. But it is fun, but it isn't very functional, besides playing a little bit of a game. So what can you do with contracts? For example, if I'm an employer and I have an employee, I can create a specific contract for that employee, which says, if I have like a half-year contract with someone, I can put like an X amount of money in the contract, and I can program that the employee can subtract any value from that contract each month. I can simply program that, and because of that, I can. I can make any, you know, like I decide someday that that person no longer has the contract. So it becomes automatically very secure to, you know, have a job. Like for now, for example, if a company goes bankrupt, you're shit out of luck, basically. I mean, you get no money anymore because the company is bankrupt and whatever money they promise you is no longer there. That's a simple fact. But if you have a contract, you have to put the money in beforehand, even if he hasn't done any work for it. It is there, but it can't breach it because you can program like employee X can subtract or get any money out each month, and he gets like 100. So if employee X would send a transaction which can be as little as like 0 point whatever. We have very long numbers, but the lowest number that we have, you send like a signal to the contract, like run it and give me the money that I am allowed to subtract. So for example, I can get like 1,000 from it, and then it would give me 1,000. I would be very happy, so I can, you know, do groceries, pay my rent, and everything like that. Then the company goes bankrupt, but I can still get the money from it because the employee has already paid for it. But the question is then, what if the employee doesn't do what it should be doing? So then you can build a mechanism which says, I can take 5 people, and if all 5 of those people sign some sort of like a contract that the employee doesn't behave or doesn't do what he should be doing, then the contract becomes valid, gets destroyed, and the company gets back the money. You can program that. So. And you can do the same with shares. You can divide like a whole bunch of shares in the contract, and then each person gets a piece of the pie, and he would own that forever. There's no one who's going to say he doesn't own it because it's there. It's in the contract. It is in the blockchain, and you can cheat the blockchain because it is a consensus network. That's how it works. And these codes get turned into.
A question.
That's what it turns into. Yeah.
How long the contract will last? Is there any?
It stays there forever. So if you put the contract in, it stays there until you send like a suicide command. The code that you just saw get turned into like an assembler language, and the assembler language would run. So we have like a virtual machine that is like an alternative universe that lives inside our world, and it has no access to anything. So it doesn't have any file access, it doesn't have any internet connection. There's nothing that it can access except for, you know, its own little private little world. And that's all it has. And if you can build anything within within that box, and so the virtual machine is the limit. basically. And it is Turing complete, so you have any ideas, you put it in and it will do whatever you want it to do. And that's kind of how it works, in a nutshell. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I saw int32, does it have types in the ASM? Or?
And not in the ASM, no. So you have memory that you access, and you specify. So if I have an int32, it'll be like, well, a limited size. But you can put in assembler. You can actually specify assembler instructions, and you can have any size that you want. I mean, it's just a memory, and you can say like I want to access memory X to Y, and do whatever operation you want on it.
How do you prevent people from running an infinite loop?
You can't. You don't prevent, because you have to have an enormous amount of a fee, because for each instruction you pay a fee.
Okay.
So if you were to run into an infinite loop, eventually you run out of money, and then
The contract would stop working.
it would stop working and it would exit. Simply as that.
Can I ask my question in Dutch?
Oh yeah, sure.
Een van de dingen die Bitcoin aantrekkelijk maakt, is dat iedereen de blockchain kan controleren. Maar nodes die worden niet gecompenseerd voor dat werk. Als ik een niet mine, dan krijg ik niks. Ik kan het wel controleren, maar krijg ik niks. Maar als je nou een contract hebt met enorm veel instructies, hoe kan ik die controleren als node terwijl ik er niks voor krijg? Ga ik dat doen? Als ik wie krijgt die fee? Krijgt alleen de miner die fee?
So the only one that gets the fee is the miner,
Yeah.
no one else. So if you want to compete for whatever, if you want any ether, you have to mine for it. Everyone has to validate. So if a miner propagates a block to the network, it would look all the transactions that are currently included in a block, and it would apply onto the last block that the node knows about, and then it will see if the new block that it compiled out of all the transactions, it would validate it against the block that it received from the miner, and then if it compares, if there's we call it a state root, if it's equal, then it is a valid block, and then it's getting included. But yes, everyone has to validate all the contracts, all the transactions, but the miner does the actual work of finding the proof of work, because that's what we still have.
Maar ben je bang dat mensen niet alle contracten gaan uitvoeren en gewoon blokken gaan minen?
No, you can't. You're not allowed to do it. You have to do it because we have a Patricia tree, and that means that it is a large tree, like a Merkle tree that Bitcoin has as well. And if you don't do the work that you should be doing, as in run the contract, your Merkle root is not going to be valid, and you're going to be a node which is pretty useless to the entire network.
Maar in Bitcoin er zijn niet heel veel miners. Er zijn een aantal mining pools zelf. Nee, maar ik denk dat de meeste mensen die Bitcoin gebruiken, die minen niet. Hoeveel miners zijn er in deze zaal?
Current or past as well?
Nu? Dat bedoel ik, dat zijn er niet heel veel. Zijn jullie niet bang dan dat er alleen maar nodes komen die dus aan het minen, maar dat er heel weinig zijn?
Nope.
Waarom niet?
There's going to be pools, absolutely, and as long as people mine, it's fine.
Ja, oké, maar nogmaals, ik heb niet zo'n snel computer, ik heb alleen een smartphone. Ik wil Ethereum gebruiken.
You're not going to want to do that on your smartphone, no.
Ja, exactly.
Okay, so so we have the blockchain 1, version 1, and that's what we shaped it, and it is a full node. You have to, if you want to run Ethereum, you're going to run a full node. Simple as that. There is no other way. You can have like a web wallet if that's what you want, then fine, by all means use a web wallet. But there are plans for a blockchain version 2. Normally I'm kind of hesitant to talk about things which hasn't been set in stone, but since you brought up the question, we have something called thin nodes, and I explained that guy over there earlier that a thin node is like a splinter cell, like Al Qaeda. So they have like splinter cells, and all the cells together form like a node. And Ethereum would have something similar as that. So if you were to take 10 nodes, they will form a full node in total. So everyone has a portion of that. So meaning that you can rely on a couple of people that you trust that speak the truth. And it doesn't mean that I have to run each contract. Someone else is running contracts as well, but I take every uneven
Dus dan ben je eigenlijk
contract.
gewoon onderdeel van een pool eigenlijk.
Kind of, yeah. Like a validating pool. Not a mining pool, but a validating pool.
Maar waar ben je bang voor?
Nou ja, in Bitcoin kan ik met een klein simpel computertje op mijn telefoon kan ik de hele blockchain nalopen en zien van oké, alles klopt.
Maar waarom zou dat met Ethereum niet kunnen?
Nou, omdat daar dus scripts in kunnen zitten die ontzettend veel computerkracht gebruiken.
Oh, but you have to understand that even though the contracts seem complicated, you're going to be very careful specifying and creating contracts because they cost money. They cost ether. So we have the value ether that is put into the system. If you want to create a contract, you pay for it. Then when you want to run a contract, so I send money to the contract which has to be run. I have to pay for, first of all, each instruction. And some instructions cost more than any other.
Dat betaal je, de miner krijgt dat geld.
Yep, the miner gets the money.
Niet ik als ik zeg maar
Nope.
de blockchain door.
It runs very fast.
Ik bedoel, kijk, iedereen wil optimaliseren omdat het zo goedkoop mogelijk moet zijn. Dus een Raspberry Pi kan dadelijk ook prima Ethereum minen als dat je concern is, zeg maar. Dus dat hoeft het probleem niet te zijn.
Oké, nou ja.
Denk ik hoor.
Ja, precies.
Ja.
Ik denk voor niet, maar zal de toekomst uitdoen.
We have heard this before, and it is a concern. In some sense, I agree with you. But we'll see. The reason why I say we'll see is because we're going to start a research group. So we're going to hold an Ether sale pretty soon, and hopefully we get enough Bitcoins. You can pay Bitcoins, you get Ether. So it's like simply a sale. And the Bitcoins are going to be used for a research group which is going to do a lot of research in crypto space, and not just related to Ethereum. It's going to be a non-profit organization which isn't tied officially to Ethereum at least, and they're going to put a whole bunch of research into anything cryptocurrency. So even the concerns that you have, it's probably going to be brought up and going to be researched.
Okay.
I have a question. Is Ethereum not more like BitCloud?
I don't know what BitCloud is. BitCloud?
Yeah.
What is BitCloud?
Yeah, they only have a vague roadmap.
I don't know BitCloud.
Well, but then
we don't only have
sort of distributed cloud. So like Amazon, but then everyone who participates is also part of the cloud.
I don't know. I have never heard of it, so I can't tell.
Basically, incentivized storage solution.
Yeah.
So you store stuff,
Yeah.
which you make available on the network, and for that you get an incentive. And
Which is
for the same reason. If you want to store something in that
In the cloud.
distributed cloud,
Yeah.
you pay, for example, either with Bitcoins or with anything else. So.
okay. Yeah, so sure. We are not that, but if you wanted to, you could develop that within Ethereum, within like I think it's called a proof of existence.
Yeah.
So you can use a hash table, dump your stuff in, and so you build it on top of that.
Let's do 2 more questions. Yeah?
If you would summarize Bitcoin, I would summarize Bitcoin as computers voting on which transactions are valid and become set in stone.
Right, yeah.
Or set in blockchain.
Yeah.
Could I summarize Ethereum as computers voting on the outcome of calculations? So instead of one computer?
Not voting, no. Everyone running a contract, if it's a valid node, has to have the same outcome. If it doesn't have the same outcome, you're wrong. As simple as that. I can't put it any other way. I mean,
so if you have a dissenting outcome, then you don't participate anymore in the network.
Yeah.
Then that's the same with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
right?
with Bitcoin.
Yeah, if you dissent with.
So every transaction is a valid transaction, because it doesn't have any in and outputs. So every transaction is simply valid, unless you don't have the ether that you specify that you want to send to someone else. So there's no voting going on, as in which is valid and which is not. If you have a transaction, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be valid.
Well, it's about consensus.
It is about consensus. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, right? If you have 50% of the nodes saying this thing and
so yeah, 51% has to
agree.
agree. Yeah, absolutely. But so how are you going to get something else from a whole group of, like, how do you want to do that?
A transaction, is it correct if I describe the transaction as any change in the memories?
Okay, so, right, so maybe I didn't explain it well enough. So you have a ledger, and it says account X has 20 Ether, account Y has 20, etc., etc., etc. So each account, each address has money specified to it. So it's a simple ledger. There's no in and outputs. So if I want to send you money, I just say like remove 20 from me and add some to you. That's all a transaction is.
Okay, but that's just the Ether. What about? I mean, you can store values in.
If you have a contract, so you have
calculate.
You
can store contracts in it.
Yes. So the contract, it's specified in a data package. So a transaction is actually a communication medium.
So if you send a transaction, you can send it to an account which could be just your personal account, but it could also be sent to the account of the contract. And if you then send a transaction to the account of a contract, then the codes for the contract get executed. So you trigger the execution of the contract by sending the
But first you have to create them.
Assuming that they exist.
So you put in code, and then the code gets put into your database, and then everyone puts the same thing into their database. And then I send a transaction to that contract, and then the contract runs.
Is that contract part of the blockchain?
Hang on. Maybe in the sense of time, you know to find each other.
Hey, just come to me. I'll explain it to you.
That's one general question about Ethereum, and then we just continue. You had
there was
sure.
ASIC resistance was also.
Oh yeah, so ASIC proof. We originally came up. Well, Vitalik came up with Dagger.
Hang on. So what's the problem with Bitcoin and ASICs? Can you very, like in one line, explain the issue?
Centralized mining, basically. So
the problem is with Bitcoin is because of the Bitcoin mining algorithm. It's at this point you need dedicated hardware and then very expensive investments to be able to still do mining. So at the beginning you could just do it with your laptop or with your GPU.
There is no incentive to mine.
Now you cannot really mine anymore unless you spend a lot of money up front. So it becomes, at one point it was really decentralized and everybody could do mining. Now it's really a dedicated profession.
We have a mining 101.
Like only 3 or 4 people can do mining with Bitcoin. And with Ethereum they want to prevent that.
In another way. So we originally came up with Dagger, which is a proof of work, but the research group is going to be there for us to support any research that we need in order to come up with a better proof of work, because it is, while Dagger is memory resistant, it's still not perfect. So we have to come up with the best thing that we can come up with. But we're going to put work into that and a lot of research.
Ideally something useful.
Like splitting. What do you call it?
Yeah, like finding prime numbers. You know.
If you wanna, if you have any ideas, then please, by all means.
Well, I said it on the forum a couple of times that you could just make like a contract of a magic wallet that magically creates ethers.
A contract that creates magically ethers.
Yes, you just build it into the Ethereum. That's not a good idea, maybe.
No, probably not.
All right, I think we have a lot more questions about Ethereum, but for now, let's hold this, and afterwards we can always go to Jeffrey for more. Thank you.
So thanks.